Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, it is afternoon, just checking the time. Welcome to another podcast. This one's going all over social media, Facebook, TikTok, wherever. It's going to go over the lot because this needs to be discussed. This podcast is titled Justice in Action, and we're holding enforcement agents accountable. So welcome to today's episode, where today we're going to uncover the truth, protect the vulnerable, and hold power to account. So this one, we're discussing an ongoing case involving a vulnerable individual who we will not name for obvious reasons, who faced shocking treatment by an enforcement agent from Marstons Recovery, and how we're standing up for her rights. But please note, all information shared today is based on verified facts and follows lawful guidance with no intention to defame or harm anyone involved. So let's put it into context. Let's start with the story. This case involves Ms. X, a vulnerable woman suffering from mental health challenges, who became the target of enforcement action by Marstons Recovery for an alleged penalty charge issued by Transport for London. The original fine? Well, as we all know, it is a manageable sum for a minor ultra-low emission zone contravention, but through a series of unexplained escalation, this fine has ballooned to a staggering £25,000. Yes, you heard that right. £25,000 for a minor infraction. What makes this story truly concerning is the way Ms. X was treated during the enforcement process. An enforcement agent, Mr. A. Green, visited her property, clamped her vehicle and subsequently removed it, despite being informed that the debt was informed dispute and that Ms. X is a vulnerable person. These actions have left her not only without her vehicle, but now also in severe emotional distress. So let's look at some of the alleged breaches. We will not list them all here for obvious reasons. We are addressing multiple alleged breaches of regulations by Mr. A. Green, which highlights serious issues in the enforcement process. Here's a short breakdown of the key concerns. He failed to acknowledge vulnerability. Ms. X explicitly informed Mr. Green multiple times that she was a vulnerable person, which he ignored, and when you think at the end of the day, enforcement agents are required to assess and address under the Taking Control of Goods Regulations 2013 and the National Standards for Enforcement Agents 2014. Rather than suspending the enforcement there and then and referring the case back to the creditor, Mr. Green continued his bullying antics. That's all I can explain it. It's bullying. Continued his actions, exacerbating her distress even more, to the point where an ambulance had to be called to deal with her stress. He seized the vehicle, despite there being a dispute. The alleged debt was formally disputed with Transport for London, and this was communicated to the enforcement agent. According to the law, enforcement should not proceed while a debt is under dispute, yet the agent took her vehicle anyway. The excessive fees, the charges added to Ms. X's account was extraordinary, from initial fine to over £25,000. The fees far exceed what is allowed under the Taking Control of Goods Fees Regulations 2014. These regulations cap the fees for enforcement at various stages, yet the charges applied here have violated those limits. He refused to leave the property after being repeatedly asked to leave because he is causing distress and harm. Mr. A. Green allegedly refused to do so, adding to her emotional distress. This conduct raises concerns about harassment under the Protection from Harassment Act 1997. Each of these breaches highlights not just a failure to follow regulatory standards, but a disregard for the basic rights and dignity of individuals. So what sort of action are we taking? Again, this is not the full list. This is just a short list of what we're doing. We're taking a multi-pronged approach to ensure accountability and justice for Ms. X from the Iron community. So this is basically what we're doing. We're now pursuing a civil claim against Mr. Green for the harm, loss and distress caused to Ms. X. This claim will seek compensation for emotional distress, financial losses and the improper seizure of her vehicle. The minimum damages we will pursue in court are £10,000, but this figure could rise significantly based on the full evaluation of the losses and harm caused. We have submitted formal complaints to the Civil Enforcement Agency, the body that regulates these idiots, highlighting these breaches. Regulatory bodies have the power to investigate and take disciplinary action against agents who violate the rules. But we're also going to hold Marstons Recovery accountable. Beyond Mr. Green, we are pursuing a case against Marstons Recovery itself for failing to properly oversee and regulate its agents. The company has a duty of care to ensure that its agents follow the law and act fairly, particularly when dealing with vulnerable individuals. We're escalating to TfL and the Ombudsman. We're engaging with Transport for London to address their original penalty and ensure their processes for enforcement disputes are improved. Additionally, we will escalate to the local government and social care ombudsman to highlight systemic failures. This podcast is part of our broader effort to raise awareness of the rights individuals have when dealing with enforcement agents. Vulnerable individuals should never be subjected to this treatment, and we want to ensure that no one else has to go through what Ms. X has endured. But before I wrap this podcast up, I want to share some key takeaways for anyone facing enforcement action. If you are vulnerable, inform the enforcement agent and ensure they record it. Enforcement should stop immediately, and the matter should be referred back to the creditor. Always dispute the unlawful charges and request a full breakdown of all the fees. If you face misconduct, file a formal complaint with the creditor, the enforcement company and the regulatory bodies like Civia. Remember, you have rights. Enforcement agents are not above the law, and there are clear standards they must follow. So, in closing this podcast, we will continue to keep you updated on this case as it progresses, ensuring transparency and accountability. But I would like to say this to you: if you or someone you know has faced similar treatment, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Standing in Truth. Let's stand together to hold power to account and ensure justice for all. Thanks very much. Have an amazing day today. Bye-bye.